Hey guys, and welcome to Game Talk with Firewatch. So, I wanted to get Firewatch as it looked quite good, and it looked like it had potential. It was recommended to me by a friend and had decent Steam reviews. However, I was warned that it was a predominantly narrative-based game, and that most of the interaction is between someone named John, who you play as, and a lady on the radio. Again, this sounded different and interesting, so I was intrigued. I was hoping for something a little bit innovative, and while there is some good stuff here, I have to disagree with the reviews. I don't think this is a good game at all. In fact, I think that this barely qualifies as a game. I just don't think the story is that great, and I don't think it's that interactive. It's not really a game. There are better stories out there. But anyway, let's begin our watch. Credit where credit is due. The game has a high degree of polish. Graphics, sounds, it's bug-free, controls are alright, although there isn't much to control, but there's nothing really functional that needs fixing here. It's quite nice. I've heard that there were a few issues at release, but that hasn't been my experience. My experience has been bug-free and very slick and polished. So that's really good. The travel, radio, and map mechanics tie in really nicely. Let me explain. So, during your playthrough, most of the time, you're traveling around from place to place. Naturally, this would be boring as all heck, unless you're doing something in between. In a game like, I don't know, Doom, you are just traveling the map, of course, but you're fighting things in the meanwhile, you're uncovering new story elements. There's always things happening, so the travel is never boring. But if you were to just go from point A to point B, yeah, it would be really friggin' boring. But luckily, in Firewatch, you have two major mechanics which kind of keep you preoccupied. So the travel is kind of interesting. You have the map and the radio. Now, let's go and start with the radio. You have the delight of conversing with a certain someone on the radio for most of the game, and much like listening to a podcast, it's fairly entertaining. You also have the added benefit of being able to pick your responses, which also can change the way that the person on the radio talks back to you. This is quite interesting. It keeps you engaged as you're traversing around the map. Likewise, you're given points of interest that you need to travel to, but nothing really shows up on your HUD. In order to get there, you need to look at the map, figure out where it is, and then orient yourself with the compass. Using your navigation skills and investigation skills, you will get to your destination, but it does require a little bit of effort. The map's not that big, and you get the hang of it pretty quick. But at least there's something there that isn't just follow the dot. The map sends you to some locations multiple times as well, and that's never really concerning. At least I didn't find it concerning. I didn't really notice it, and it's smart because the developers could reuse the map, saving precious time making extra content. You cover pretty much the entirety of the map in your playthrough. So in summary, I just want to say that the developers have done a fairly good job of keeping the player engaged and entertained while they're actually doing something that would otherwise be very dull. I don't really consider Firewatch a game after playing it through. A game's somewhat hard to define, and my searches online kind of lead me to believe that there isn't really one definition set in stone. I think there are fairly good definitions out there, but for now, I'm going to just use what Wikipedia says, and it says that a game has goals, rules, challenge, and interaction, which is going to work fine, so let's run with those. And let's quickly go through them and see how well Firewatch does. So let's start with goals. I think that a good game would have multiple goals, or a singular goal that you can tackle in multiple ways, or both multiple goals and multiple ways to do those multiple goals. It's interesting to note that Firewatch has almost no goal other than to just follow the story. Even if you did have a goal, like for example, solve a mystery, you have no way of doing that goal other than following the story. Rules. Not really applicable here. I don't want to go into why it's going to take ages, blah, blah, blah. But basically, it's a computer game. It has a framework. So this is basically a pass for Firewatch here. It has the same amount of rules or framework as, say, Doom would have. So yeah, that's fine. Rules is okay. Challenge. The game doesn't have any challenge whatsoever because you can't fail. The only thing that you can possibly do is get lost in the woods for a little while before you find out where you're actually supposed to be going. So there's no challenge whatsoever. You can't get anything wrong. You can get, I think, maybe different endings. Who knows? I didn't even really get that impression, to be quite frank. There is essentially no challenge. Interaction. Here's where the game really falls down, and I am disappointed with it the most. The whole benefit of playing a story game is the interaction. That's the advantage over a book or a movie, that you can interact with it. And that's why I'm very pissed off with Firewatch, because it felt like 2 times during the course of my playthrough, I was offered a choice, only to have my choice negated by the game and continue on as if I had never picked the choice in the first place. So what's the point? What's the point if you're just gonna go the other direction anyway? I mean, do I have control over what happens or not? I think this is where the game falls down the most, and this is where I really don't want to call it a game, because I tell you what, I can forgive the other ones if you can interact with it. Then it's still a story game, you know? But you can't. Not really. Not in a way that is actually meaningful. Now, for a story game, I don't think the story is that great. I'm probably not the best to critique this, however, because I'm not really a fluff and story guy. I'm not a writer, I'm no George R.R. Martin, I just care about mechanics and rules and gameplay. But that said, I know what I like, I know what I don't like, and I can at least give you my opinion here. So here's my 2 cents. I think the story is pretty bland. It only really begins to heat up near the end, but it cools down almost immediately as it sort of goes past the tipping point and you get told the answers. I feel like the people aren't really believable in the game as well. I think the protagonist and his hot sex line companion were believable for the most part, except for right near the end where they just weren't believable at all. Not only that, but sometimes they would act a little bit irrationally, a little bit... a good example is at one point the chick on the radio, she is drunk, and she's drunk for a few lines of dialogue, and then she instantly sobers up. I mean, there's quite a bit of inconsistency there, and in a few other places, but for the most part, they're pretty good. However, some of the other characters weren't believable at all, and there's a few red herring storylines in there, which really just, when you figure out that they're not important at all, you don't care about it anymore, and it's just a kind of a waste of time. I would have really liked it if there was one solid storyline being put in place at the very beginning and just following that through all the way to the end. I just don't think it's a very good story, but hey, what do I know? So I'm going to quickly look up some Steam reviews here, because I kind of find it hard to believe that the game got good Steam reviews. I mean, if you look at it, it's got 13,000 reviews with a score of 84%, as at the 6th of the 6th, 2016. So let's have a quick look and see what people say, huh? What the fuck? So I've just uncovered a really cool, Steam review gem. This person recommended the game and said one word, amazing. And guess what? 12 out of 15 people found this review helpful. What the fuck? How is that helpful? Who are these people? Do you have one brain cell to share amongst all of you? One word, amazing? Yeah, that tells me everything I need to know. Ugh. Right, moving on. So a lot of the good reviews are kind of vague. This is one reason why I drill home the negatives, because just talking about good things is not helpful. It's just not. But that said, a lot of people don't seem to be bothered by the storyline, or especially the lack of interaction. In fact, very few of them have said anything about the interaction being good. So I assume that they just don't find it a negative. That said, me especially being so drilled into game design and what makes a game and how to make a game good, of course the interaction is a big thing for me, so maybe I'm blowing it a little bit out of proportion. But, I mean, I just feel like if you can't interact with it, it's not a game. And if it's a story-based game, then being able to choose the type of story or how things turn out is quite important. But maybe it's less so for some people. Alright. So, one thing of note is that the game is only about 3 hours playing time. That's how long it took me to play it. And I'm not actually that concerned with the length of the game. I mean, short games are okay. It's just the price tag that you associate with it and whether it's worth it. And that should seriously factor into your decision making here, because the game is fairly expensive for what it is and for how long you can play it. So that's something to keep in mind. If the game was cheaper, then it would be a much easier pill to swallow. But right now, it's a fairly big pill, and the benefits aren't that great. So in terms of medicine, it's not a dose I would take. I can't fault the game for its polish. I mean, it's pretty tidy all up. But I can fault the game for not being interactive. I would have liked to have seen the main story sewn in from the get-go, just having one main storyline, and having a bit more continuity between the main character and your hot radio assistant, and also maybe a little bit more character development there and a little bit more of a relationship tying in. But honestly, I don't know who to recommend this game to. or who to recommend this game for. It's clear that some people out there like it, but I just have no idea who you are or where your loyalties lie. I mean, I assume it's people who like story, but don't really care if it's good or how it's told. But who are you people, you know? If you like stories, then surely you should like good stories. But hey, you've heard my thoughts on it, and if it looks like it would appeal to you, I mean, check it out. It's up to you. So, one thing kind of hit me all of a sudden while I was tying up this deliciousness. I think what we're seeing here with the Steam reviews is, it's like confirmation bias almost, you know? It's people who like story games will play this game, and they probably, I mean, it's the best story game that is out there, I'm guessing, at this time. It's not that well of a fleshed out genre. So naturally, people who enjoy that kind of game are going to jump in, and it's going to be fairly good for them. It's something where it's got nothing wrong with the polish, nothing wrong with anything like that. It's just not as good as it could be. And I'm tackling it from that angle. I'm saying, hey, what would a perfect game look like? Where could this be improved? You know, and taking it back from there. But this is probably, I haven't played all of them, but this is probably up there in terms of story game, or games that are purely narrative focused. So the people who like that kind of game, who tend to go towards that kind of game, may be flocking to it. But at the same time, maybe it's not that. Maybe I'm just off key with the general populace in this one. But I don't know. It's just a thought. Alright, that does it for me. As always, really looking forward to the next one, and I'll catch you guys on the flippity flip. Ciao.
Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.